All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 6. We completed Matthew 5 2 weeks ago. Of course, we're kind of going in, doing a deep dive on the Sermon on the Mount, but in particular, trying to apply how those principles that Jesus has been teaching through this Sermon on the Mount, how we can apply it not just to our lives, but to our homes, and how that can not just, it's the idea of our homes being little embassies, if you will, embassies of God's kingdom, and how that each home can influence the world around it. And I want to begin this morning just by asking, and it's something that we hardly ever do. You know, we'll ask each other when we see each other on Sunday mornings, you know, how you doing? And the answer is fine. You know, and so we'll ask each other about our physical conditions, but I doubt, maybe we've never had this experience. I think we would be probably kind of taken back if someone came up to us on a Sunday morning and said, how are you doing spiritually? How are you doing spiritually? I think that would kind of stun us, and I don't know that we would even be able to answer that. Because I don't know that we really take a whole lot of time to evaluate ourselves and how we're doing spiritually. And how would we even go about that? I mean, if we're going to evaluate our physical selves, we know how to do that, right? Those of us who haven't thrown the scales away, we step up on the scale and we kind of see where it lands. Did you hear the joke about, sorry, this is just, Chris is like, what are you doing?
I'm not worried about you and your joke.
No, this man's wife was wanting a car really, really bad, a sports car, you know. Kids were out of the house, you know, it's time to live for themselves, you know. And husband asked her, honey, what do you want for your anniversary? And she says, I want something that goes 0 to 100 and fast as possible. And so he buys her a scale. So anyway, that's bad. I know. But we know how to evaluate ourselves physically, right? I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
I was hoping for
that was. But how do we do that? You know, I mean, we kind of deceive ourselves even in the physical aspect of how we're doing. You know, I mean, you know, here we are, we're sitting in a recliner at night watching Netflix from show to show, eating Cheetos, and we say to ourselves, well, you know what, physically I'm doing pretty good, you know. I'm kind of in shape, you know, and so, but what would happen if you had to run all of a sudden, you know? All of a sudden after several yards, you're catching your breath and you can't really go, and all of a sudden you're realizing, hey, I'm not doing so great physically, right? And so testing is what reveals what our status is physically. And the same thing is true in the spiritual realm. Physically, when we're tested, when we have to run or lift something heavy or climb up a bunch of stairs, when we have to do something hard, then all of a sudden we know exactly how we're doing physically when we're out of breath and everything. But testing our faith is very, very similar. We evaluate our spiritual well-being through testing. And that becomes a very key principle for Christians. When we test ourselves, testing is going to reveal all of our spiritual deficiencies. But at the same time, testing is going to also bolster our spiritual strength. And so let's just kind of sit with that just for a second before we get into the text. Testing reveals our spiritual deficiencies and at the same time bolsters our spiritual strength. That's why James, in James chapter 1, James talks about counting it all joy. You know, he's talking about testing our faith. Maturity comes from testing our faith. Spiritual strength comes from testing our faith. The testing of our faith is a good thing, and that's why James says, count it all joy. And when we go through all these various trials, when we go through these tests, as it were, we should consider it a joy because it's going to strengthen us spiritually. But at the same time, it's strengthening us. It's also going to show where we're spiritually weak and where our deficiencies are. Just like if I had to go, or we all had to go and run a mile. Yeah, that's not going to happen, right? Running that mile, eventually you're going to see where your physical deficiency is very quickly for some of us. But when we're going through trying times, when our faith is tested, it reveals our spiritual deficiencies. And we're to count that as joy. We're to be thankful for that our faith is being tested. Because even though it's showing where we're spiritually weak, it's also strengthening us. And it's making us stronger, and it's making us more mature as a people, even though it's showing where our spiritual weaknesses are. And so we've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount. And as we're going through each one of these sections, I've been saying that this needs to be an introspective class. It's where we're looking in the mirror at ourselves. And we're showing the deficiencies. Hopefully we're seeing where we are spiritually weak. To be able to say, I'm not as patient as I should be, or you know what, I really like control, and it's hard for me to let go of control, and I don't like the feeling of not being in control. And you know, when we ask ourselves these hard questions, it's important for our spiritual growth. And we can really see, talking about spiritually testing, we tend to really see that when we go online. You know, in the last couple of decades, social media has kind of taken over everything. And it's so, if we can recognize very quickly what our spiritual weaknesses are if we become very introspective to how we relate to other people online. We can look at others and we see anger. We see maybe fear, maybe a lot of bitterness, criticism, jealousies. You know, we'll say things online that we would never say to a person's face, but we'll just say them online because we're behind this keyboard. That can really reflect some of our weaknesses spiritually. But at the same time, when we're dealing with things like that, we can make the decision to, I'm not going to do that. And as we refrain from those things, even though here's this comment that infuriates me, as we refrain, that helps us grow spiritually. And so when it comes to testing, we tend to be tested one of two ways. We're tested sometimes intentionally, sometimes we're tested unintentionally. And so we've got to ask, when the test comes, no matter what kind it is, you know, how are we going to react to the test? What are we going to do with the results of the test? You know, are we going to use it as this period of time of learning about ourselves, of seeing what we need to work on, allowing the test to actually do its work that it's purposed to do? Now, we're getting into this area in Matthew chapter 6, and the reason I'm going through all this is because we're going to talk over the next few weeks about spiritual disciplines. Spiritual disciplines. And spiritual disciplines act as an intentional kind of testing. And there are things in the world that will unintentionally test our faith. Driving unintentionally tests our faith, right? Driving in traffic. It could be a crisis that we're dealing with. It came on suddenly, unexpectedly, and now we're in the middle of it. We're in the thick of it. That's going to test our faith. That's unintentional. And it's stuff that we didn't plan for and we didn't want. You know, we don't want the problems, right? It wasn't part of our plans. And we're going to go through seasons of unprovoked testing, unintentional testing. But the spiritual disciplines that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks, That's intentional testing. This is a way of training our faith. It's like you get up and actually want to go on a run on purpose, right? No one's chasing you. And so, the unintentional test, someone comes up and is trying to mug you and, they have a knife, not a gun, so you run away and they're chasing you. Well, now that's an unintentional way to test your physical prowess, right? But when you get up and go to the gym and get on the treadmill every morning, that's intentional. When you choose to run, that's intentional. And this is how the spiritual disciplines that we're going to be talking about work. They're intentional testing. It's an intentional testing of our faith. And they're used so that we can see, same thing as the unintentional. They're used so that we can see where we're weak in the faith, where we need strengthening. And they're used also at the same time to help strengthen our faith, to bolster our strength, if you will. And so when you practice what Jesus begins to talk about here in chapter 6, when you practice the idea of giving in secret, where we're going to be this morning, or fasting, or meditation, all of these are spiritual disciplines that will reveal where our spiritual weaknesses are. And so it's extremely important that we're honest with ourselves about where we are as Christians, where we are spiritually. These spiritual disciplines will reveal what we're really addicted to. Whether it's control or pleasure or the approval of others, it will bring that out. But they also have the ability to help us draw nearer to God. And so we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared in life. Just like if I want to be prepared for someone coming up and chasing me and I want to be able to outrun them without getting winded and possibly having a heart attack, I have to intentionally test my physical well-being and train it. That means I have to get up in the morning and go to the gym and do all of that stuff. But spiritually, it's the same way. If I want to be prepared for the unintentional testing, I need to be intentional about my spirituality. And I need to be practicing these disciplines on a regular basis, strengthening myself, helping us draw closer to God so that when the unintentional things occur, we're going to be spiritually fit to get through them. Okay? All right. And we need to understand that it's an opportunity. All of these, as hard as they are, and they're not easy. This isn't an easy section of Scripture. In fact, it's so difficult that we've ignored a lot of these over the years. But they're important. They're important. We need the trials. We need these practices. We need these disciplines so that we have a very honest view of ourselves spiritually, and we're not duping ourselves to think that, hey, I'm okay, when we're really not. All right? So, let's go ahead. Let's go to Matthew chapter 6. Someone, if you would, read verse 1 for me, please.
Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven.
Okay. Practicing your righteousness. What does that mean? What does it mean to practice your righteousness? Have you even ever heard the term or paid attention to it?
I would say being performative.
Performative? Okay. Performative? Okay. Anybody else? What comes to your mind? Show off? Okay. So kind of a negative aspect of it is probably how we view the word righteousness, right? It's interesting when we look at the Hebrew context. Now, of course, Matthew is writing in Greek, but his audience is to Hebrew Christians, Jewish Christians. The context, as he's on the sermon, talking about the mount, as he's on the mount giving the Sermon on the Mount, he's talking to a group of Jewish individuals. And so even though he's writing in Greek, he's using Jewish terms, Jewish thoughts that would be familiar in their minds. All right? The Hebrew word that would have been used for practicing your righteousness is the word tzedakah. All right? Tzedakah. All right. Age test. How many just went to Neil?
Neil.
One. Okay.
I'm an old soul.
Out of all who raise their hands, I'm completely taken aback by that, but okay. It's the term tzedakah. Tzedakah is a Hebrew word, kind of fun to say even, tzedakah. Not Sudoku, but tzedakah. But what Jesus is saying here, be careful not to parade or to practice your righteousness or parade your acts of tzedakah in front of people in order to be seen by them. So what does tzedakah mean? One Jewish rabbi put it like this. If you asked 1,000 Jewish people, Hebrew speakers, to translate into English this word tzedakah, 500 of them would say charity. The other 500 would say justice. Now, in English, is charity and justice the same thing? Absolutely not. And so this is kind of a quandary here. How can one Hebrew word be translated into two words, justice and charity, which in English are completely different? Well, let's use this illustration. Okay. RD?
Yes, sir.
Somewhere in the past, you loaned me $100.
Okay.
This is an as if you really didn't do it. As if, okay? Okay. So you come up to me and you say, Mike, I need $100. Well, I've already borrowed $100 from you. And so I reach in my pocket, I give you the $100. Giving that to you, that's justice, right? That's the idea of making something right. He gave me something that was rightfully his. It's fair. It's just for me to give it back because it belongs ultimately to him, right? Justice. Now, if RD comes up and says, can I have $100? And he never loaned it to me, but I give it to him anyway, that's charity, right? Okay, we understand those two concepts. And so in English, something is either charity or something is justice. It really can't be both, right? If someone works for something and they get what belongs to them, that's justice. That's being fair. That's fairness. If someone gets something that doesn't belong to them, that's charity. But in Hebrew, those two concepts are one and the same. And that's the word tzedakah. And here's why. Okay? In the biblical way of thinking, and it's supposed to be also in the Christian way of thinking, if we realize what it really means to be part of God's covenant people, then we'll realize that nothing belongs to us. Everything belongs to God. And so when you give someone money, it's God's money that you're giving to them anyway. You're partnering with God. And that's what we as God's covenant people are to be doing. We're being God's covenant partners in the world to make the world more fair, to make the world more just. And so when we give away money, we're doing justice, we're doing righteousness, we're doing charity, and it's all at the same time because nothing in our mindset belongs to us. It all belongs to God. And so for Jesus, for the apostles, and even for us today, when we have a biblical mindset, if I give RD $100, I haven't given RD my money. I've shared with RD the money that God gave me to be a steward of. Therefore, you can do both justice and charity, tzedakah. So this idea of practicing righteousness, doing fairness, doing charity, it's all wrapped up in this one concept. All right? But when we do that, Jesus says, beware. Now, doing tzedakah is a good thing, right? It's not the negative stigma that we put on righteousness of it itself, because we think of righteousness, and again, I use this all the time, but that's just how SNL has scarred me. You have the church lady, right? That's our idea of righteousness, and it's always in a negative. But this is a positive thing. To do tzedakah, practice your righteousness, we're supposed to be doing that. That's a good thing to do. And yet there's a danger in it. In verse 1, Jesus begins by saying, be careful. Be careful. Now, anytime Jesus says be careful, we have to realize no matter what he's talking about, there is an inherent danger in it. And Jesus wouldn't tell us be careful if there's not an inherent danger in what we're doing. And so what's the danger then in doing tzedakah? In practicing righteousness? In being charitable? He says you might be doing it for the wrong reason. And the specific danger is be careful that you don't do that in order to be seen by others or in order to be seen by them. And he gives us an example. Someone read verse 2, please.
Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward.
Okay. So here's the danger. And it was a very real danger because people were doing it just like this. And the Pharisees would make a huge show. You know, we don't have to pretend not to know who the hypocrites are in this, right? He's talking about the religious leaders and the Pharisees in particular. But they would make a big show of doing righteousness, doing tzedakah, doing justice. You know, here they're supposed to be partnering with God to make the world a better place, make it more fair, more right, and so they're to give to the needy and they're to distribute what God has given them to other people who are in need and to lift them up, help them get a better standing in the world. But Jesus says that's not really what their intention is. They're not really, they don't really care about doing tzedakah. They're not really motivated by practicing righteousness or being just or fair. Their real intention is to simply be praised by others. He says that they may be praised. That's their intention. And so there's a distinction there, right? There's a distinction that we begin to see. Their intention isn't to practice righteousness, to do the right thing, to partner with God in His covenant and be His covenant people. Their intention is to be praised for practicing righteousness. And there is a big distinction there. And so they didn't care about being just or fair. Their intention was to be applauded for it, to be appreciated for it, to be lauded for it. And we can fall into that same trap. And we have to stop and recognize that we have the same temptation today. That we can be motivated by the same thing. And again, going back, nothing has put a magnifying glass on this more than social media. I mean, how easy is it to take credit for things online? You know, we can say, yay, I'm on God's side and I'm a good person and I'm doing good things and I'm all about fairness and justice and here's the proof. And we pop it on there, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and we're counting the little thumbs up, the little hearts, the likes. Look at me, look at what I'm doing. It's very easy to want to be seen and praised and applauded for doing the right thing. Now, let's be very clear. Is there anything wrong with doing the right thing? No, absolutely not. And there's nothing wrong in being seen doing the right thing. There's nothing wrong in that. But there is something wrong with being motivated by those accolades, doing it for the sole reason of being seen, just so I can take the credit. There's an old story of a turtle, and he's found himself several miles from the ocean, and he wanted to get back to the ocean, so he sees two seagulls. And he takes a string and he ties it one end to each of the seagulls' feet. And as they take off, he clamps down on the string. And so they're carrying him right to the ocean. And he's all proud of himself. And he hears people looking up and seeing these two seagulls and this turtle hanging on by a string. And he hears one of them say, "How clever is that? I wonder who thought up that idea." And the turtle says, "I did." Think about it. Yeah. There's danger. There's a danger there. when we want to take the credit all the time, when we're doing things just to take the credit, it can lead to our own demise. And again, we're really tempted to always sit in lessons like this and point. You know, I know people like that. Oh, so-and-so, that's her perfectly. So-and-so, that's him perfectly. But we need to look at ourselves. Am I like that? Am I like that turtle? Am I always wanting to take the credit? Am I the first to pull out the camera and get on Instagram? Am I the first to post and to brag? We're not talking about them. We're talking about ourselves. We've got to look in the mirror and realize with every single opportunity that we have to do good and to practice righteousness, there's also the opportunity to do it for the wrong reasons. And we can end up just like those religious leaders, doing the right things for the wrong reasons and not have tzedakah as our goal, but instead having our goal to be praised by other people. But Jesus gives us a solution, okay? I always hate when people bring me a problem with no solutions. Give me a solution, a suggestion. Jesus does that. Someone read verses 3 and 4.
But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you.
Okay. So Jesus gives us a spiritual discipline to practice, to help us with this, to strengthen us in this aspect. But don't make the mistake. The spiritual discipline here isn't the giving. The spiritual discipline here isn't the serving. The spiritual discipline here isn't the practicing of righteousness. In fact, if you look at how Jesus says, when you give, that tells me Jesus expects his disciples to be givers. He expects God's covenant people to be practicing righteousness and to go out and to do good and to make the world a better place and to give to the needy and to do all of those things. That's not the spiritual discipline. The spiritual discipline is to do that, but to do it in secret. In other words, to do it anonymously. So secretively that your right hand doesn't know what your left hand is doing and vice versa. That's a spiritual discipline. To do it anonymously, in secrecy. Now, does that mean we are erring and we're sinning when we do something publicly? No, not at all. A few weeks ago, we're in Matthew chapter 5. We're to be the salt of the earth and the what? Light of the world. A city set up on a hill that cannot be hidden. A light that cannot be hidden. And then he says, other people are going to see your good works. And do what? Give credit to God who is in heaven, your Father who's in heaven. So he's not saying there's no time where you as God's people are to be doing good works publicly so other people can see you. But he is saying that it is a spiritual discipline to practice doing good secretly, to practice tzedakah, to practice righteousness anonymously, to do good works, give to the needy quietly. And what's the reward when practicing that spiritual discipline? Your Father who sees in secret will what? There's great reward in doing that. When we do the right thing for the right reason, there's a reward for that. But every opportunity, again, when we have an opportunity to do the right thing, there also comes the opportunity to do the right thing for the wrong reason. And when we do the right thing for the wrong reason, what does Jesus say happens? You have your reward. If you're doing good just to be praised by people and they praise you and you get the applause and all the appreciation that goes along with that and all of the accolades, well, that's the reason you were doing it and that's what you get. And that in and of itself is your reward. But Jesus says if you practice it secretly so that you know that what you're motivated to do is being motivated by the right reason. You're doing it because it's right and fair and just, and it's the right thing to do. And you're not doing it so other people will see you and then praise you, oh, what a great guy you are, and applaud you and pat you on the back. If you're practicing doing good secretly, you're testing yourself, and you're making sure, you're testing yourself, making sure that you're doing it for the right reason. Yes, ma'am.
It just made me think about, not just for people, but I think with God too, right? Like if we're like, oh, I did this, now God reward me. It made me think of that lesson we had about, your heart being like the 5-year-old in you,
Mm-hmm.
Like, Mom, I did good. Give me that cookie.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes we never grow out of that. We never grow out of that. That's very true. And we get the reward. We'll get the slap on the back. But what reward is going to be greater? It's the reward God gives us, right? Now here's the question. What reward is he talking about? What is Jesus talking about? What reward are we going to get from God?
Place in heaven.
Place in heaven?
Yeah,
Eternal life, okay. Sharing his agape, okay. We tend to go right to eternal life, right? And ironically, there's a debate on what this reward is. And on one side, there's the eternal life. Jesus is talking about heaven and eternal life and a place with God in the afterlife. And then there's this other side. You were saying it's an immediate reward.
internal satisfaction of having done good.
Well, that, but drawing closer to God.
God says he blesses us in this life.
Yeah. And so which is it then? Is it eternal life, or is it drawing closer to God now? And we get the benefits now, and we enjoy those benefits now.
Is it both?
Either or equals?
Both and.
Yes, both and, right? Absolutely. And so when we do good secretly, yeah, we're, what's the word? Up treasures. Storing up treasures in heaven. Sorry. It's Sunday, man. Brain, go ahead and rest. I don't need you today. No, we're storing up treasures in heaven, right? And so there's that aspect of it, but at the same time, this is part of drawing close to God. And when we draw near to Him, what does He do? He draws near to us. And so we're strengthening ourselves at the same time. And so when we do good secretly, we get to have this secret relationship with God. And He rewards us with better relationship, a deeper relationship, stronger relationship. But we also know that in the long run, we're going to be recipients of His promises as well. Now, let's kind of bring this down. There's a principle that Jesus begins to teach here that He's going to build on with several different other disciplines that we'll look at in the next coming weeks. But when we give secretly, we are sacrificing the praise of others for the pleasure of God. Okay? When we give secretly, that's what we're doing. When we're being intentional about giving secretly, when we're being intentional about sacrificing the praise of others, we do so because we know the pleasure of God is better than the praise of other people. It's better to make God happy than it is to make people happy. And how are we going to know that? How are we going to know and learn that principle and practice that principle? Well, we do so by sometimes doing things secretly and anonymously, and intentionally sacrificing the praise of others so that we can experience the pleasure of God. And so, what does that look like in real life? Okay? How would we apply it? Maybe we go out and, as God's covenant people, we're to be doing good. But maybe when we do it, we don't post about it. We don't tweet about it. Or is it called Xing now? It's still tweeting, right? I don't know. We don't Instagram it. We don't Drop it casually in a conversation with somebody. Known people to do that. We talk about the social media thing, but sometimes in conversation you say, well, yesterday when I was helping that old widow move or feeding someone or doing something, I saw a swallow. What are we doing? We're dropping what we've done and bragging, right? Going around the world so we can look humble, but bragging at the same time. No, just do things secretly. Because let's be honest about it. We have the urge, right? We have the urge to want the applause, to want the praise, and to put it on Instagram and count the likes on Facebook. But we need to recognize that urge for what it is. It's the desire for appreciation and applause. It's the desire for praise. But we've got to remember that the pleasure of God is worth multiple times more than the praise of people. We've got to sacrifice the praise of others for the pleasure of God, and we do so by doing it secretly. And so we begin to imagine in our head, we're doing something good, but I'm not letting anybody know about it. I'm going to purposely do it anonymously because I'm doing this for the pleasure of God. And this is going to be between me and Him. And we can imagine God saying to us, well done. Well done, my good and faithful servant. We echo those words because let's face it. The accolades, when we want people to clap for us and appreciate us and praise us, it feels good, right? It can become addicting as well. But the truth of it is that those feelings are very, very shallow. Because when it's gone, then what? You're empty, right? And all of a sudden you want it again. It's addicting. It is addicting. And we'll do anything to get it back. We'll do anything. But when we do good secretly, and we are being intentional about sacrificing the praise of others for the pleasure of God, when we are allowing God to break us of that addiction, we're allowing God to break us of that approval of people and being addicted to other people's applause and other people's appreciation. Because I think we all feel that way at some point or another, right? Most of us anyway. Everybody's kind of sat back and say, well, I wonder if they even appreciate what I do. Why doesn't people appreciate me? I've worked hard and I've done so much. We get addicted sometimes when we do good in secret. We have an opportunity, practicing this particular spiritual discipline, to exercise our spirituality, to exercise our faith, and to allow God to break our addiction to approval, to applause, and to the appreciation of others, and to actually sacrifice those things for the pleasure of God. Any questions or comments on any of this? Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say, one of my friends has always told me, like, you can't have a testimony without a test.
That's a good play on words there. I like that. That's very true.
I've always, like, every time, like, things happen, whatever, I always take a deep breath and think about it, like, why not me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what makes me so special that I can go through X, Y, and Z? Nothing. I am not better or less than anybody else. It's just, I feel like we go through things through life, so we can either draw near to God or we can distance ourselves. And I think that when we humble ourselves and draw near, then God will use us, because we're supposed to be used as vessels, right? We're supposed to ask God to use us. And we may never know when that moment may come, but then God will put you in a situation where it's like, this is why you went through this. And then you can be that light and that hope.
Absolutely. It's hard to know when you're in the thick of it. And it always tends to be 2020, right? Kathy?
I think it's also why we need each other. We need honesty.
Absolutely.
When you started the class with how you doing spiritually, we need the honesty among us because none of us can really do this alone. You need
Right.
the strength that we draw.
And we're not supposed to. It's not designed to be done alone. You read through the book of Acts, and we're going to spend a whole lot of time in the book of Acts next year. The church was never designed to do this individually. This is not an individual effort. It takes all of us. And just imagine if we actually held each other accountable. You know what we hold each other accountable to? Were you here? And that's it. It's never what happens Monday through Saturday. It's where were you Sunday? And we've been kind of trained by culture in that, because we are an individualistic culture. It's about what I'm doing for me. But Christianity is the antithesis of that. And so, what if we had that mindset? How would you react if all of a sudden the greeter on Sunday morning, hey, how you doing? They hand you the bulletin, and how are you doing spiritually? What would you say? Would you even know what to say? I mean, but what if we made it as a practice? How would that change our reaction to the question? Because then we're used to it and we know, and all of a sudden we have accountability. And what would happen to those little secret sins that occur during the week that no one knows about except for you and God? What if we had that kind of accountability? What does light do to the dark? It dispels it, right? Sin thrives in darkness. And you know what we do? We allow ourselves just to stay in the darkness. We allow each other, I should say, just to stay in the darkness. What if we started to pull each other into the light? How would that strengthen us? How would that strengthen us during the week? And what if we put this in practice and said, I know not everything we do has to be in secret, but what if we became purposeful with this and started actually practicing that? What would that reveal about us? I think it would reveal a whole lot about us and give us a lot to work on. Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the big barriers to that, not just here, but everywhere, is people are afraid to share what happens outside of here, or things that are upsetting. So no one forms the close connections that you need to be able to actually help somebody that way.
100%. And there's so much there. Because, we're afraid of gossip. That's a big thing. I don't want my business being thrown all over the place. Sometimes we're in positions, as preachers, elders, deacons. Well, they knew that about me. What's that going to do to my position? Because we know, and we've experienced individuals in the church who are only looking to hurt, not to help. And they will use your weakness against you. And that was true all the way back, going back into the wilderness in Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. It's always been true. That's the way of people. But what if we could get past that? What if we could just take that next step and have the accountability among ourselves and actually be able to trust, maybe not everybody, but some, and we could hold each other accountable. Because again, when we look at the biblical example, that's what they did. That's what they did. They knew each other intimately. And that meant they knew their weaknesses. And they were able to help one another and lift one another up. And somewhere along the span of time, we got so far away from that actually sounds radical in our Christianity. But the truth is, that should be the status quo. All right, anything else? Yes, sir.
It's one of the things that I always think of, and I think we all need to think of. Personally, I don't have a problem with making a decision when I see something that needs to be handled or taken care of, if it's helping people or things or whatever's going on. I don't have a problem with stepping up, getting my hands dirty, or whatever it is. I've always been that way. And I think if we think more about what would Jesus do, every time that you are faced with that, it's not coming here and telling what you do. It's it's what would you do?
Yeah.
If you say, what would Jesus do?
And we could
Step up.
we could
Step
even
up.
extend that. Philippians 2. Have this mind in you that was in Christ Jesus. And what does he say? Think of others as more important than yourself.
Sure.
You know? And again, you can apply that general principle to what we're talking about here into every other aspect of life. And so someone comes to you and you know, Tyler comes to me and says, you know, Mike, I'm struggling with this. I'm not going to get on the phone with Paul 5 minutes after he leaves the office. You know, I'm not going to use that as the opening example of next week's sermon. It'll be in 2 weeks. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Kidding.
Some time to get ready, okay?
Yeah, just time, you know.
It's not the recognition.
Right.
I've never thought of that. I've never wanted it. It's just because I could do something about it, I think I should.
Yeah.
And what would Jesus do? He would.
It's the recognition of the problem, and the problem needs to be solved.
That's right. I you know, it's not hard for me to make that decision.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right. We're good.